Welcome to Daf Yomi B'Halacha. We're learning today Siman Tov Tzadiches, Sif Aleph, Beis, and Gimel Be'ezras Hashem, page 212. Tov Tzadiches, Dinei Shchita B'Yontov, Seif Aleph, the dinim of shechting on Yontov, Uboy Chof Seifim. There's 20 Seifim to learn. We've discussed trapping the animals in Siman Tov Tzadizayin. Now we're going to discuss the halachos of shechting animals on Yontov. Shchita is a meleches eichel nefesh. It's necessary in order to prepare food, and therefore it's permitted on Yontov, provided, well, the Ramah mentioned in Siman Tov Tzadihei, it's permitted if the activity would taste worse if it was done before Yontov, and that's how it is with Shchita. Therefore, animals may be shechted on Yontov. Shulchan Aruch Sif Aleph. Ein marin sakin lechacham b'Yontov. True, an item can be shechted, but one may not show his knife to a chacham on Yontov, liras to see him by if it is suitable for shchita. Of course, a knife for shchita has to be absolutely smooth, and there's a concern. If he shows his knife to a chacham, there's a concern, maybe the knife will have a nick, and the chacham will say, that he may not use this knife because of this nick it has in it. And the fellow himself will go, he'll use a sharpener to sharpen the knife. And to sharpen the knife is a malacha of either makabeh patish, Mishnah Berurah says, Siman Tov Kuf Tes Sivkot and Yud, or daimel memachek. It's a part of the malacha of smoothing, as the Mishnah Berurah says in Siman Shin Chav Gimel Seif in Seif Tes. However, the Shulchan Aruch continues, v'chacham, some use a chacham himself, she'ro sakin yatzmik, he can see his own knife, and he's allowed to lend his knife to others, and there's no concern that he's going to smooth it. But Achshav says the Ramah, nowadays, Bizman hazeh, shekol shoichet roya sakin biatzmai, shoichet checks his own knife. Kol haroite lishchet b'Yontov, somebody wants to shecht on Yontov, yivdek sakinoim erev Yontov, should check his knife before Yontov. For lo b'Yontov and not on Yontov, sham yashki zelo, because he may come to smooth it. Miu however, im lo bodkem erev Yontov, he didn't check for Yontov, in its pressing circumstances, he can check his knife on Yontov, assuming there's no other knife around available which was checked from before Yontov. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah Sivkot and Aleph. Ein marin, one doesn't show a knife to chacham on Yontov. Even if he already checked it, this butcher checked it for Yontov, it was clear, smooth. To see, nevertheless, it shouldn't be taken to a chacham to see. So one would check the knife after checking it oneself, and would take it to a chacham to check it. There's a concern, maybe it'll be blunt, and he'll take it to the chacham, and the chacham would say it's not valid, and he would actually still sharpen it. But the evidim heralodim says, if, however, he was checked, and it was found to be okay, the din is it would be permitted to actually use this knife for shchita. In fact, the reason one can't take one's knife to the chacham, the Shulchan Aruch brings the reason of the concern. Maybe the person may see that it's, maybe told that it has a nick, and he'll come to smooth and sharpen the knife. In fact, there's three other reasons brought in the Rishonim. The halacha to maskul shemo allude to them, and do show the back explain. Rashi holds the reason is because of the techol, because by asking the chacham, it looks like he's planning not only to shech but also to sell his meat in a butcher, in a market. The Rif brings another reason that there's concern. Maybe he'll go outside the tchum, beyond the boundary, to find the chacham. The Balamora says the concern is that looking at a knife, giving it to a knife to chacham, to the paskin on it, to validate the knife, is an element of tikkun mana, just like asking a chacham to check a mum on a bechor, and therefore is an element of tikkun mana involved in asking the chacham. And the Mishnah explains that although that may be the reason, but a chacham can see his own knife, that's not really considered as paskining on it, because he's just clarifying the situation of the knife rather than passing on the knife of somebody else. And therefore the Shaltzion says that if a person did actually go to the chacham and the chacham said the knife is okay, according to all the reasons, there'd be no reason to forbid using the knife, apart from according to the Balamor, there's reason of tikkun taking place. But apart from that, all the other reasons, there's been no reason to ask the knife if it was actually shown to a chacham, although it shouldn't have been shown to him. Shedra second yatzmes if cotton dalet, the chacham can see his own knife. Hainu bebeisa b'yontav k'delish in his house on yontav to shecht it. Vayim b'ri chodosh metzaded afilu chatchila yochel hachacham liris hakinu shalatzma. Even ideally, in the first situation, the chacham could see his own knife. K'dei lashil lachem, even to lend it to others. The reason that the chacham is permitted because for him, there's no concern he will sharpen it. Today he knows also the hashkas that he may not sharpen it. This is actually therefore mutar chacham gam ken ksheinu raya this ksheinu roitza lismech al v'dikosai laris hakinu the chacham achin. In fact, the chacham can actually show it to another chacham because he knows he mustn't sharpen it. It sounds from here that the concern of the Shulchan Aruch of the standard person is the person who won't realize he's not allowed to sharpen it, and he'll go to the chacham say it's not sharp, it has a nick in it, and he'll go and sharpen it, not because there's a yitzhar for him to sharpen it, but rather because he doesn't realize that when we're not sharpening a knife on Yom Tov. Roya secondly at Moisif cotton tape. Nowadays, every chosh checks his own knife. Shasayim Kanal Kabbalah, she actually relies on the authority he has to check knives. Yeah, and that's how it is. Although really there's an element of cover that one shows on the knife to the chacham, but when the sheichet has shows the knife to the chacham, when the sheichet receives a ksav kabbalah, the crazy says, he receives a ksav, a permission to shech. It's understood that from that point on, the Rav is meichel in his cover. He permits him to check the knives, although from time to time the Rav would check the knife of a sheichet. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Yivdok sakinim erev yontif. The knife should be checked before Yom Tov. Don't return it to its sheath. Because if the point or the side of the knife touch the hard, rough surface of the sheath, then lo mikrisu sakin bodok is no longer considered a check knife. Could have become damaged by touching the side of the sheath. The sheichet should have 2 or 3 knives, but took him check Meir Yontif because in case one comes out to be possible to have a nick in it, then it's still going to be okay because he has other knives. Below Yontif, he shouldn't check it on Yontif. Hainav Diko Shena, the first check, the check before Shchita, one always checks the knife. The checking of the knife after Shchita is permitted. There's no concern the person will sharpen it if the Shchita is already taking place. Because sharpening it after the shechita is not going to help for that animal which was shechted beforehand. Yochel abodka b'yontif. If it's a shasat chak, it could still be checked on yontif. Going she'ein be'er sakin achash and yontif. No other knife which is checked for yontif. Shasat chak could check it on yontif. Says the Shulchan Aruch Seif base. So the reason things have changed, the Ramah is mentioning there's a distinction nowadays. Every sheikh checks his knife. Ideally, should check it before yontif, but if he did manage to, he could still check it on yontif. The reason things have changed is because the various reasons we gave for not being allowed to take the concern of taking one knife to a chacham has a concern he may come to sharpen it. It doesn't really apply if a person is sharpening it for himself at home. So the reasons, for example, Rashi's reason of the choil looks like he's going to set up. If he's having it checked in his house, it doesn't look like he's doing any activity that people would think he's planning to shech the animals to sell them. The other concern of maybe he'll go chutz l'tchum, he's not going to go chutz l'tchum, he's checking himself in his house. And the Balamora's reason also that checking a knife is a form of tikkun moneh, so that's sort of like paskening on this knife, that this knife is now kosher, it's changing its status. Well, if as we mentioned before, if he's checking his own knife, then he's not changing the status of it, he's just verifying something that he knows already. And therefore, all these reasons would permit, therefore, sharpening on Yom Tov, and therefore I didn't want to sharpen on Yom Tov because the concern he may, he doesn't check the knife on Yom Tov, the concern he may come to sharpen it. But the other reasons don't apply. Nowadays, when a person checks his own knife, therefore, for Shas Adchak, he can check his own knife on Yom Tov. Seif base. One may take the knife and the animal to the sheichet to shecht it on Yom Tov. Even a small goat, even if it is to be carried, you can take it and carry it on Yom Tov. We haven't really discussed carrying on Yom Tov. Shulchan Aruch saying carrying is permitted to take a knife and an animal to be shechted. Although you could have taken it the day before, you're not expected to. It's permitted because carrying is permitted outright in this situation. The butcher could bring, or the sheikhet could bring the knife to the animal. Both are permitted to be done. These items can be carried right across a public domain, which would involve carrying Minat Torah if it would be Shabbos, or Yontif as well if it wouldn't be under the permitted circumstances. There's no concern maybe he'll change his mind. He won't shech the animal, and therefore he's carried out the items unnecessarily. We're not concerned for that. He can carry outright, as the Mishnah Berurah explains. If gotten yud to move an item for eating purposes is as if he's doing a malacha for eating purposes itself. Like he's preparing the food is permitted, like Risha is permitted, kneading dough and baking bread is permitted. Similarly, Hoitzah is permitted. In fact, it's permitted outright. In fact, it's even permitted even more than the lisha or the bishul. Lisha bishul, we said that Ramah says that if it could be done with Yontif and taste the same, it should be done with Yontif. As we mentioned at the beginning of Simon Tov study, hey, but here with the Hoitzah, it's completely mutter. It's not like machshira echol nefesh at all. It's even stronger than, as I said, stronger than lisha bishul. There's no difference whether he could or couldn't have brought the animal before Yontif. With regard to carrying, we say a principle of mitoich, provided there's some sort of need on Yontif, we would permit it, although he's not carrying a food item to be eaten, he's carrying something which is needed, a substantial need, and it happens to be here, it's in order to affect eating. The kitzah, Hoitzah, is mutter, provided one has a necessity for it, as we'll see in Siman Tov Kuf Yud Ches. One can also bring the knife to the animal. We don't say that it's better for the animal to walk to the sheikhet. Now, the difficulty that I have with this, and perhaps you've also had the same difficulty, is that we know that carrying on Yontif is permitted, provided there's some need. But even if in the end you don't actually need the item, it's permitted because you took it out, because you thought you'd need it. This is discussed in the Dirshu notes in the Tov Kuf Yud Ches, Mishnah Berurah Sivkot Yud, Dirshu note 25. And therefore it disturbs me that the words of the Mishnah Berurah here, which is based on a Gemara, that says that that one can take a knife out, or the animal can be taken to the butcher. But in Choshen, we're not concerned maybe he will change his mind. We're not concerned maybe he will change his mind. That sounds like, and if he would change his mind, he would have inevitably transgressed the malach of carrying. Now, I'm just questioning that because if you take something out with the intent to use it, there's no concern of carrying because you've taken out with it for a good purpose. The fact that later your plan didn't actually come into being, it doesn't change the fact you took it out with permission, and that's okay. So this in Choshen Shema Yimloich is disturbing. Seif Gimel. Behemais sheyotzais v'rois chutz l'tchum. Animals that go out and they shepherd beyond, they graze beyond the tchum. That means every city has got a tchum, a band around it, which is the limitation to the position how far a person can actually go on Shabbos Yontif. A person can't move beyond the tchum of a town, which is 2,000 amos, about 1 kilometer. And if you have animals also are subject to tchuming. And this animal, when Yontif came in, was beyond the tchum. But it comes back and stays frequently, comes back to the city and stays in the city. These animals are considered expected, prepared for Yontif because they're frequently here and that's considered underneath the person's own jurisdiction. One can take them, and shecht them on Yontif. It's considered designated for Yontif because they so frequently come back. They come back to stay, to sleep within the tchum. They come back at night. Animals that graze and live and sleep beyond the tchum, so then they're not expected to come back. It was unexpected. In fact, when Yontif came in, we would have thought that these animals would have been out of usage and wouldn't be able to get hold of them because out of the tchum. In Bo Yontif, therefore, even if they do come back to town on Yontif, ain't sheikhs in Yontif, you can't check them on Yontif. Because they are out of sight, out of mind. The people would not been able to get hold of them on Yontif because they weren't expected to come back. But for Hani Mili B'Behemis Yisrael, that's discussing an animal belongs to a Jew. Aber she'eni Yehudi, a non-Jewish animal, less muksa. There's no concern of muksa. The ein Yehudi tzarich hachin. A non-Jewish item doesn't need preparation because a non-Jew could always bring his item back into any place he wants because it's not subject to any tchumen. And therefore, a non-Jewish animal would not need designation and one could shecht it. Elem kain borbish for Yisrael, unless the non-Jewish person brought the animal to the town specifically for the Jew, also because then we've got a principle that one can't benefit from activity, a malacha which has been performed by a non-Jew for a Jew. So if the guy brought this animal especially to town for a yid, for a Jewish person, he couldn't use it not because of muksa, but because of the malacha has been done for a Jewish person by a guy. At this point, we have to add in a few words to the Shulchan Aruch. That's talking about, we know for sure the animal was, when Yontif came in, was outside the band of the tchum of the city. And therefore, he brings an animal in the market. The place where they deal with animals and they sell and they shecht animals. If we know if we know that the non-Jew had these animals when Yontif came in were outside the tchum asuris, so then that means they were brought in for the Jew or for the Jewish person who plans to sell it to. If we're not sure, then we're not sure where the animal was, then they're permitted even if they were brought for the Jew, because it could be that the guy didn't move it into the area of the Yid on Yontif. The word muksa here really should say shatchumin, because with regard to tchumen, when we've got a question whether an item was or was not brought from outside the tchum by a non-Jew for a Jew, since tchumen in essence is drabonon, it's mainly drabonon, we've got a rule, sofik drabonon lahokel, sofik tchumen lahokel, and mechaber is paskaning here to be lenient, and we have a question if an item is brought beyond the tchum into the city, and it's going to be mutter. If it was brought on Yontif, if it was brought to town for a non-Jew, but or the town has most people in town are non-Jewish, and the animal was brought for sale in the town. So mutter, it's okay. Maybe because we've got a principle: if a non-Jew does an item and he does a malacha for a group of people, we consider it to be being done for the majority. And since here the majority are not Jewish, so therefore, we say when the goy brought the animal on Yontif from beyond the tchum into the city, he did it for the right, for the non-Jews. He didn't do it for a yid, therefore it's okay. What about the problem of muksa? In muksa, by an item of the goy is not subject to the dinim of muksa because the goyish item could always have been brought. Okay. Says the Mishnah Brura Sivkat and Yud Beis. So again, the Shulchan Aruch begins discussing an animal which comes back into the tchum to sleep. Therefore, it's considered an animal which belongs in the city, and therefore it's expected that a person could get hold of it on Yontif to shecht on Yontif, and therefore it's not muksa, it may be shechted. Sivkat and Yud Beis. Lav dafka b'chol yom. So they come to stay night, even if it's not every night. Even if they come often back to the city to sleep, now to stay overnight. Now they're considered designated and prepared in the city. In Hastam, under normal circumstances, as we will see. One may take them, even if they actually only end up coming at night. Assuming there's no concern of tchumen, in Rak Lester is tchumen, provided there's no issue of benefiting from an item brought for a Jewish person from outside the tchum. If an animal by itself walks back into the city, there's no issue of tchumen. There's no provision to benefit from it. It wasn't a goy who did it for a yid. It just happened by itself. The animal came back. So the choshev alayo klau bin hashmoshes, even though the animal actually, when Yontif came in, was outside the town, then it walked back into town, or even if it walked beyond the tchum, straight into the town, a long distance. Nevertheless, now they're permitted to kabhemas by socius domi. They consider domesticated animals. One doesn't need to think about them before Yontif, since they can and frequently do come back to the city there, and they came back themselves. No of tchumin there, they may be used on Yontif. But the animals that live and sleep outside the city, for example, they pasture the entire summer until Cheshvan, and then they come home. The entire summer, a person in the city doesn't expect to see them. Therefore, if they do come back on Yontif, one can't have them because they weren't designated. It was assumed that they would not be in town for Yontif, and therefore they're muksa. in Bo Yontef, and therefore, if these animals do come back on Yontef, one can't shech them on Yontef. But why are we talking here? Sivkot and Tesvov. The last is the Tchumen. They're talking about there's also no concern of Tchumen. Again, no non-Jew brought the animal back for a Jew on Yontef through a Tchum. For example, they came by themselves. The Jewish person, maybe he made an Erev to that side where the animal was, or it was brought. It was actually brought by a non-Jew, let's say, for a Jew or any other similar circumstance, but not for this Jew, for a different Jew, and therefore a second Jew may benefit from it. But otherwise, otherwise, there's a concern the animal came out from outside the tchum. We're trying to avoid that issue. We're trying to only discuss the issue whether or not the animal was designated with Yontif, and excluding the concern of the animal being brought in a prohibited way from the tchum. Ein sheichtin, if an animal lives outside the tchum and it comes on Yontif, one can't shecht it because it wasn't designated before Yontif. Well, the man decided muksa b'Yontif, the opinion that holds muksa is permitted in Yontif, mutarin, would say this is permitted. Meaning that we had this discussion, Simon Tov Sadi Hey, Sif Dalad, with regards to a food item or potential food item, which is not expected to be eaten on Yontif. Mechaber holds it is muksa, the Ramah holds it's not muksa. The Mishnah Berurah says that the concern of muksa would only be according to the Mechaber over there. And others that say also, even the Ramah over there would hold these animals are muksa, asa, to kiven shein nichnosas litchum kolim kayets. Since these animals they stay out of the zone, the city and its band throughout the summer. Have a look at Gerogus and Smukin. They're extremely desert, almost that they're completely unlikely. Not only unlikely, they're also almost like they've been pushed away. It's like a food item which has been pushed away and put to dry for a long period of time. In which case, an item which is pushed aside, if we want that a person actively dismisses it not to be in use, then everybody would agree it would be muksa. And similarly, these animals that they don't come back the entire summer, then they're completely pushed aside from being used on Yontif, and the muksa, even according to the Ramah, permits a food item which was not designated for eating on Yontif. And if the animal belongs to a non-Jew, then there'll be no concern of muksa. Therefore, even if throughout the winter it doesn't sleep at home in the city, nevertheless, it's a non-Jewish animal, there's no concern of it being not designated. However, unless the non-Jew brings it beyond the tchum, in which case there's going to be a concern of tchumin. If a non-Jew brings an animal from beyond the tchum for this Jewish person, then it's also for the Jewish person to benefit from it because it's a tchumin. It's also for this yid, but it's permitted for another Jew to benefit from it. Yeah, the fikach, therefore, the Mishnah Berurah is now going to add a few words, as I mentioned before when we read the Mechaber. The words here are confused. The Einim is saying in the duration there's something missing, it doesn't flow. For MS and Mechaber Mechaber is now beginning a new point. The Chosa Kan is a few words are missing. As we said in the Bialocha, we have to add the few following words. It's only if we know the non-Jew brought this item from Chutz L'Tchum, then it's going to be forbidden for the Jewish person on Yontif. However, a non-Jew who brings an animal to the market, they bring the animals to a Jewish type of market. You saw sheikh and a Jewish person shechts it, and sells the meat. This guy comes with his cow, sheep. We don't know. Do we know? We don't know if he brought him or not. Unless we don't forbid it. It's a suffix whether the item came by the guy into this Jewish area on Yontif or not. Did it come from Chutz L'Tchum or not? Therefore, it's not forbidden. However, if we know that the non-Jew brought it from outside the Tchum, it's forbidden. So our ones, we know that it stayed outside the Tchum, to stay, to sleep at night outside the Tchum. Therefore, the non-Jew clearly brought it into the city for the Jewish people of the city. It's forbidden. Provided we're talking about the city which doesn't have a majority of non-Jews. So I mean, if we say to if a non-Jew brings an animal to a town which is primarily Jewish, so then it's considered the non-Jew brought the animal for Jewish people on Yom Tov, and it's come from Chutz L'Tchum, and it may not be eaten because of Tchum. However, if it's a doubt, we can be lenient. Because with regard to muksa, we go make when we have a doubt. Mishpur is going to say, it doesn't mean muksa, but it's a shel tchum, an item which is brought beyond the tchum. We're not sure if it came from beyond the tchum or not. Can be lenient. The Kohen Nami muksa. It's also in some respects to be considered muksa. Muksa means designated or pushed aside, and he also was pushed aside. It was beyond the tchum. We know already from Simon Tov study science if Gimel and Sif Dalet, Sofik Muksa we are machme. Sofik Tchumen the Machaba is taking on to be lenient. Machaba bekan hechsik b'shitas hapoiskim the Tchumen kilo of the Machum besfeik. The Machaba is taking on Tchumen is more lenient and when needn't be machme if one has a Sofik. Kvatom achronim the achronim ask on this to become as possible because that's hapoiskim the hachle gamba something Tchumen shincha faceiv test Simon Tov kov test vav Sif Dalet dispoir. That's interesting. The Mechaber takes on Sofik Tchumen is mutter, but in other places he's machmer by Sofik Tchumen. If you have a city which is, if a non-Jew brings the animal for another non-Jew, it's permitted. There's no issue of Tchumen. But mutter even for a Jewish city, if he brought it for a non-Jew, and the Jew somehow gets hold of it, then there's no concern of benefiting from the fact that the non-Jew brought the item from beyond the Tchum. So just to summarize. We've seen today that a knife shouldn't be shown to a chacham to see if it's suitable for shchita, because the concern the person may come to sharpen it. Chacham can see his own knife, and nowadays the knife should be checked before Yom Tov. If it wasn't checked before Yom Tov, Shas Chach can actually check it on Yom Tov as well. We saw in Sif Beis that one may carry Hitzah mut on Yom Tov. There's a din of mitoich, since it's mutter for food purposes, mutter even for non-quite food purposes, as long as there's a tzorech and yontif, therefore one can bring an animal or knife to the sheichet to shecht, or the sheichet who can move the knife to the animal to shecht on yontif. And as if Gimel we've seen, animals, in order to be able to eat them, they have to be designated. We've seen this already in Seif, in the Simon Tov Study Zayin. The Shulchan Aruch says that designation has to be that they sleep at night in this particular town, otherwise they're not considered designated. You can't shecht them on Yom Tov. Or if a non-Jew has an animal, there's no concern of muksa because it's automatically considered designated. There's another concern if a non-Jew brings an animal from outside the town for a Jewish person, it will be osab. That's only if A, it's for a Jewish person, or a city where are Jewish, and B, it has to be for sure that we know. Says the Mechaber that for sure it came from out of the Tchum. If it's only a Sofik, it would be mutter. Thank you.